Hogwarts Legacy has finally been released. You can now explore the world of Harry Potter like never before. If you're like the rest of us, you can't wait to dive in and see everything that this game has to offer. However, the world is much more vast than a lot of us anticipated, and you may find yourself overwhelmed. Because of that, I put together a quick tips guide to help you get started. The world of Hogwarts Legacy is much larger than you might expect. It's very easy to get overwhelmed and lose yourself in the moment. It seems like everywhere you turn, there's something new to do or something to explore. I find that it's best to take a balanced approach and mix exploration with the main story. Hogwarts Legacy does a great job of giving you loads to do in every moment. However, certain things like flying, the Room of Requirement, and the entire beast system are tied to the main storyline progression. Not only this, but there are certain spells that you can't unlock unless you progress the story. It's super easy to get sidetracked in this beautiful game, but I would caution you and say approach the game in a balanced way. While we're on the topic of the story, without spoiling anything, I would say progress until you at least have access to the talents. These are different skill sets that modify the way you play the game. They do allow you to specialize in certain things. You can focus on spells, dark arts, core competencies, stealth, or items in the Room of Requirement. Each one of these specializations has positives. This is actually where you start to see character builds, and your character will really start to take shape. This is also the only way to gain access to more spell slots, and if you're like me, it was frustrating not having them in the beginning. I would recommend at least pushing the story to the point you unlock your talents. ARITHMANCY doors are some of the first hidden areas you have access to. In the beginning, you will be completely lost on how to open these. Don't worry, we all were. There are actually two different ways to figure out the solution. The first way is to find the symbol key, which is in a chest in Hogwarts. If you don't want to spend the time looking for that chest, the second, and honestly the easiest way to use the doors, is to look at the casing itself. The animals around the edge are the keys. They number from 0 to 9, starting from the bottom left and going around the door to the bottom right. Armed with this knowledge, you should have no trouble doing the math and opening every door you come across, and this will save you from having to go into your inventory and look at a key every time. Early game, you will struggle with money, and eye chests are a great way to overcome that, as each one contains 500 gold. Try to make a mental note of where every one of these are when you come across them, and come back as soon as you have access to the restricted section of the library. This is a great way to make money for spellcrafting, seeds, and potion recipes early game. Legendary chests are another great thing to keep your eye out for. As the name implies, they always give you a piece of legendary loot. So you can either loot them early game for nice boosts, or you can keep their locations written down and come back at a later date when you're at a higher level and you're trying to min-max or fill in slots that you are low on. While legendary gear isn't impossible to find later on, this is a surefire way to get it. Speaking of legendary gear in early game, do not purchase any gear from GLADRAG'S WIZARDWEAR. You will level up so quick and find that the gear you just purchased has become obsolete by a blue or even a green drop. I would say save this vendor for late game when you're trying to get good or god rolls on specific gear for specific slots. What you should be spending your gold on is buying spellcrafts from the Tomes and Scrolls vendor. The basic table you get from the quest only lets you grow one small plant at a time. This is super inefficient, and you will want to get better spellcrafts ASAP. These upgrades vary from larger pots to having multiple pots on a single table. As you only get 7 table slots per table in your Room of Requirement, this is a huge time saver later on and where you should sink your money early game. These spellcrafts will be essential for you to produce herbs and combat plants later on in the game. You'll start to notice that you seem to have next to no inventory room. Every time you go exploring, you'll have to head back to Hogsmeade, you'll have to sell all the gear you don't want. It's a huge waste of time. The only way to increase your gear slots is actually to do the MERLIN challenges. Anytime you happen to pass one of these, you should attempt to do it. The challenges are fairly straightforward. However, in early game, you might not be able to complete some of them as you will be lacking the correct spell. Don't worry about this. Just come back and do it at a later time. The important thing is that you attempt to do them as you come across them. This will be a time saver later on. So as a bonus tip, I do want to tell you, in the early game, avoid fast traveling as much as you can. Not only is the game beautiful to look at, but there are tons of collectibles and essential items as you move around the game. Collectibles are tied to all sorts of things, from collectibles to armor traits, so it's worth the time to try to find them as you move around. Once you find yourself outside the castle, not only are there collectibles, but there are tons of items you need for potions and other things. Take your time, walk to your next location, pick up everything, and fight. There are collection items tied to defeating all types of enemies in the game. In the beginning, I would say only fast travel if you're planning on going more than a quarter of the map away from where you're currently at. Hopefully you find these tips helpful. If you're looking for more Harry Potter content, additional tips and guides, or other single-player content, consider subscribing to the channel so you can find your way back.